Out here, 40 miles west of the Outer Hebrides, there is an edge. A place where the Atlantic Ocean meets the sky and sheer cliffs rise from the depths. This is St Kilda. For over 2,000 years, a small, isolated community lived here, carving an existence from rock and sea. They survived storms, hardship, and profound loneliness. Then, in 1930, they left. This is the story of how a society that endured for millennia vanished in a single morning. A story of what it means to belong to a place so completely that leaving it means losing a part of yourself. This is the story of the last people of St Kilda. The archipelago of St Kilda is a fortress built by nature. The main island, Herta, is where the village stood, nestled in a crescent-shaped bay. Surrounding it are the smaller islands of Soe and Borere, and a collection of towering sea stacks like Stack and Armin and Stack Lee. These aren't gentle, rolling hills. They are vertical walls of ancient volcanic rock, pounded relentlessly by the North Atlantic. Life here was dictated by two things: the weather and the birds. Millions of seabirds, gannets, fulmars, puffins made these cliffs their home. For the St Kildans, these birds were everything. They were food, clothing, fuel, and medicine. The feathers were used for bedding, the oil for lamps, and the eggs for sustenance. In a place with no trees and soil too thin for extensive crops, the birds became currency. Their entire economy, their entire way of life, revolved around the dangerous, vertigo-inducing harvest of the cliffs. To survive, the people of St Kilda became master builders of stone. Their most iconic structures are the cleats. There are over 1,000 of these small, turf-roofed stone huts scattered across the islands. They look like ancient beehives, built with gaps between the stones to allow the wind to pass through but keep the rain out. This ingenious design created a perfect, naturally ventilated storehouse for drying and preserving their harvests of seabirds, eggs, and the tough island grasses. Their homes, known as blackhouses, were also built into the landscape, with thick stone walls and roofs of turf providing insulation against the fierce gales. Life was lived communally, within a single street of houses facing the bay. Everything was shared: the work, the food, the danger. This wasn't just a village. It was a single, functioning organism, bound together by necessity and tradition. Their world was the island, and the island was their world. Isolation as identity. Here, time itself felt different. The rhythm of life wasn't measured by clocks or calendars, but by the seasons and the migration of the birds. Winter was a time of confinement, hunkering down against storms that could rage for weeks, cutting them off completely. Spring brought the return of the seabirds and the start of the perilous climbs on the cliffs. Summer was for harvesting, and autumn was for storing. Their parliament, a daily meeting of all the men, decided the day's work: who would go to the cliffs, who would tend the sheep, who would fish. It was a pure, direct democracy born of shared struggle. Generations were born, lived, and died within this same, unchanging cycle. The outside world was a distant rumor, a place of myth spoken about by the occasional shipwrecked sailor or a rare visiting boat. For centuries, this was enough. But the 19th century began to shrink the world. The arrival of steamships made the journey to St Kilda less perilous and more frequent. Tourists, clergymen, and traders started to arrive, drawn by tales of this primitive society at the edge of the world. They brought with them money, goods, and ideas that were entirely foreign to the St Kildans. Suddenly, there was an alternative to a diet of seabirds. Tea, sugar, and flour became coveted luxuries. The islanders began to trade their tweed and bird feathers for these modern conveniences. But with these goods came a slow, creeping dependence on a world they didn't understand. Each ship that arrived brought the outside world a little closer, and in doing so, chipped away at the self-sufficiency that had been their greatest strength. Isolation weakened. Contact with the outside world brought more than just sugar and tea. It brought diseases. For centuries, the St Kildans' isolation had protected them from common mainland illnesses. Their immune systems were unprepared. The arrival of a single ship could trigger devastating epidemics. A common cold on the mainland could become a deadly pneumonia on St Kilda. One of the most tragic examples was known as the 8-day sickness, a form of neonatal tetanus that claimed the lives of an astonishing number of newborn infants. This was likely caused by unsanitary birthing practices, but the islanders had no knowledge of germ theory. They could only watch, helpless, as their children died. The small graveyard on the edge of the village began to fill at an alarming rate. With each loss, the community's spirit frayed a little more. Graves multiplied quietly. By the early 20th century, the population had dwindled to a fragile few. The young men, who were essential for the dangerous cliff work, were leaving for the mainland in search of an easier life. The remaining islanders were mostly elderly, or too few in number to sustain the old ways. The daily parliament meetings became smaller, the cliff harvests less frequent. The intricate social fabric, woven over centuries, was unraveling. Imagine the feeling in the village then. The houses that once bustled with large families now stood quiet, some already empty. The daily routines that had given life meaning for generations felt hollow. There was a sense of inevitability, a quiet resignation that their world was ending. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were only waiting. The final winter of 1929 was particularly harsh. Storms battered the island for weeks on end, cutting them off entirely. Supplies ran low. A young woman fell ill with appendicitis, and there was no way to get her to a hospital. For the remaining 36 islanders, it was the final straw. The world had changed, and they knew they could no longer survive here alone. Their ancient skills were no match for modern diseases, and their small numbers could no longer support the community. The very traditions that had defined them were now impossible to maintain. They had reached a point where clinging to their home meant certain decline. Tradition alone could not keep them alive. In the spring, they sent a petition to the government, a collective plea signed by all of them, asking to be evacuated from the island they called home. On the 29th of August, 1930, the ship HMS Harebell arrived in Village Bay. It was a calm, bright morning. The islanders gathered their few belongings, a wooden chest, a family Bible, their beloved sheepdogs. Before they boarded the small boats that would take them to the ship, they performed one last ritual. They left the Bible and a small pile of oats on the table of each house, locked the doors, and dropped the keys into the sea. It was a final, symbolic farewell. As the Harebell pulled away from the shore, the islanders stood on the deck, watching their homes, the cliffs, and the graves of their ancestors shrink into the distance until they were just a speck on the vast ocean. For 2,000 years, the people had watched the sea. Now, the island watched its people leave. Today, St Kilda is a ghost island. The stone houses of the main street still stand, their roofs gone, their interiors open to the sky. The cleats dot the hillsides like ancient sentinels, empty stores waiting for a harvest that will never come. Wind whispers through the empty doorways and rustles the long grass where children once played. But the island is not truly empty. The seabirds have returned in their millions. Gannets, fulmars, and puffins crowd the cliffs, their calls echoing in the silence left by the humans. The island is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected for its natural and cultural significance. A small number of conservationists and military personnel live here now, temporary custodians of a place defined by its permanent history. Why does the story of St Kilda resonate so deeply with us? It's more than just a historical account of a lost community. It's a story about the profound, unbreakable bond between people and place. It reminds us of a time when community was not a choice, but a necessity for survival. The St Kildan story forces us to confront difficult questions about progress and tradition. What do we lose when we gain modernity? Is a harder life, but one rich in community and purpose, more valuable than an easier one that is more isolated? There is a line between resilience and unsustainability. For 2,000 years, the St Kildans walked that line. Sometimes it dissolves. Their world is a powerful reminder that even the most enduring cultures can be fragile. The story of St Kilda is a quiet echo from the edge of the world. It is a testament to human resilience and a memorial to a way of life that is gone forever. The wind still blows across the empty village, the waves still crash against the cliffs, and the birds still cry out to the empty sky. The people are gone, but their story remains, held in the stones they left behind. A silent, powerful legacy of the last people to call this wild, beautiful, and unforgiving place their home. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Please remember to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more haunting Scottish history. See you next time.